What's the worst mistake you've seen someone do in their job? I once went to a new gynecologist to have a lump in my breast examined. I had an immediate ultrasound, but then there was silence. When I called the office to follow up, I was told that everything was fine. However, when my primary care physician asked me about any lumps during a yearly exam 3 years later, I mentioned the lump that was found previously. The doctor reviewed my records and immediately ordered more testing. Within 2 days of this second exam, I was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. It's 100% lawsuit time. During my second year of college, I worked at a startup cider manufacturer where we had to sanitize all the metal components in hot caustic wash after a day of production. This process involved cleaning hundreds of pieces, and it took quite a while to complete. One day, our managers left us with an hour to clean up before the end of our shift. I had to do some e-commerce end-of-day tasks before leaving, so I left the cleanup to my coworker. When we returned to the warehouse on Monday, we were devastated to see that it had burned down. As it turned out, my coworker had left the caustic heater on all weekend, which had caused a chemical fire that destroyed everything. The company went bankrupt as a result, and my coworker dropped out of his co-opus degree because he wouldn't be able to get recommended for another placement. So, from what I understand, the company you worked for didn't have adequate safety measures in place to prevent accidents. They didn't seem to have automatic shut-off systems, backup personnel checking, or safety checklists. I used to work as a maid in a motel, and one day our usual supervisor was out sick. The person who took her place mixed ammonia and bleach in a window cleaner bottle, and when I sprayed the bathroom mirror with it, I ended up inhaling ammonia chloride gas fumes. If the maintenance man hadn't come by and found me unconscious, it could have been fatal. As a result of this incident, I experienced respiratory problems, vision issues, and a lingering burn in my nose and throat for several months. That's really terrible. I hope you received some kind of compensation for what you went through. Unfortunately, I didn't receive any compensation other than being given 3 days off from work. The motel owners were an unpleasant duo to work for, and it was a difficult situation all around. I used to work as a preschool teacher for 8 years, until the pandemic hit. One of our protocols was to count the children before transitioning to another room, to ensure that no one gets left behind. Unfortunately, I had a coworker who was on her phone and didn't follow this protocol, resulting in a child being left behind in the toy closet. This child was only 2 years old and was trapped, crying and screaming in the dark closet for 20 whole minutes before a passing teacher heard her. What's worse, my coworker didn't receive any consequences for her negligence, not even a warning. Management never even bothered to inform the parents of what happened, which was unacceptable to me. This same coworker also made the children in her class dress themselves for outside play during winter, which is a difficult task for 2-year-olds. On one occasion, a little girl ended up playing outside in the freezing Minnesota snow without any boots on for 10 whole minutes before my coworker finally noticed. As a teacher, I believe that the safety and well-being of the children should always be the top priority. Dang, why in the world would she even work with kids? Those poor little ones deserve so much better. Honestly, you could probably ask the same question about half of all childcare workers. The standards are just too low, which is a real shame. And get this, she even went on to open her own in-home daycare during the pandemic. I can't even imagine what kind of chaos that must be. During my last day working at Walmart in high school, I was training a new guy on how to move pallets of milk into the cooler. There were only about 6 of them to move, so it wasn't too difficult of a task. However, as I went to grab the last pallet, the new guy ended up bumping into the others with the one he was bringing in, and all of the pallets fell over. It was an absolute disaster. Milk was everywhere, and all of the product was completely ruined. At that point, I knew there was nothing more I could do. I immediately left the scene and never looked back. Oh man, I've been there before. I remember this one time when I accidentally dropped a whole pallet of milk from like 30 feet up on the forklift. Let me tell you, it was one heck of a mess. I worked as a United States Postal Service employee for a solid 5 years, and in that time, I actually witnessed 2 different new carriers getting caught throwing away mail. I mean, seriously, they teach you about the severity of obstructing mail on the very first day of orientation. I just can't understand why someone would risk jail time or fines just to throw away some mail. If you're really having that bad of a day, just call off or quit. There's no need to break the law and cause such a huge problem. The post office actually has its very own division of police that is specifically tasked with investigating matters like this and catching people who break the rules. So if you're even considering something like this, just know that you will get caught. As a car mechanic, I once had a colleague who had a pretty small job to do on an engine, just about an hour or 2 of work and a cost of $50. Unfortunately, he made a mistake that was quite big, but also quite common and easy to make. It wasn't something that would have caused us to drag him through the mud or anything like that. We started fixing it, but then he made an even bigger mistake. We ended up having to outsource some of the issues we couldn't fix in-house, which ended up taking about 2 weeks and costing $500. It wasn't ideal, but it was still okay. Eventually, we got everything back and my colleague started putting the engine back together. We thought we were in the clear, but on the first run, there was another big problem. The whole engine had to be taken apart again because he broke something else. We had to outsource the repair again, and it was expensive. Overall, it took about a month to complete the repair and ended up costing around $1,000. At that point, my colleague was fired. He had gotten away with a lot, but it was just too much to ignore. Did he break the spark plug while trying to remove it? I once heard a story from a nurse friend about a devastating incident that occurred in the hospital. Apparently, a colleague of hers had been neglecting to properly check the pH aspirate from a baby's nasogastric tube before every tube feed to ensure that it was positioned correctly. Tragically, the baby passed away because the tube had actually been inserted into the lungs instead of the stomach, likely due to an unknown cut that occurred during intubation. This meant that the milk was being fed directly into the lungs and essentially caused the baby to drown. It's a heart-wrenching and preventable mistake that should have never happened. This is horrifying. I used to work at a financial company and one of my coworkers made a huge mistake that cost the company $500,000. He sent a multi-million-dollar transfer at the wrong time, resulting in a Forex differential. It was a massive blow for the company, and he was fired within a week. What made the situation worse was that he had only recently graduated from college and wasn't qualified for such a high position. His friend, who was an executive, promoted him 4 times within a year, which turned out to be a disastrous decision. He ruined his entire career, and the last I heard, he was working as a salesman. Thanks for watching.